men and women, male and female, are equal. John Paul II said that the feminine genius is needed wherever big decisions are being made. If you look at the role of Mother Mary, we have such a special role as women in the church, and that takes a lot of courage, especially in today's culture, to be who God calls me to be. If you look at all of the saints, they're so different, and they have such different ideas and spirituality, and that's so important. So the diversity of the saints, I think, can speak a lot to our feminine spirituality. The church loves your body, Christ loves your body, and that's exactly why modesty is important. We have very, very different roles to play within the life of the church. So just because we're not ordained doesn't mean that we are not valued in the life of the church.
Welcome to the Exposing Catholic Show, where we expose the lives, interactions, and stories of Catholics. Our guest today is Rebecca Ciarrone, St. Anselm's campus minister. Welcome on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, we want to talk about first connecting the mind and heart.
Yeah, so a little bit there. I right now am in the process of getting my master's degree from the seminary at St. Mary's Seminary in Wycliffe. And a lot of that has brought to light, along with my own experience, the importance of not kind of letting your mental or like intellectual just being your spiritual life. A big part of that as well was, so I've been teaching in Catholic high schools for 7 years. And a lot of the time there was this disconnect in my students between what I learned in theology class and then how I live my life and how my spiritual life sort of affects what I do in the everyday. So that coupled with my current development in Catholic understanding and, the intellectual part of master's classes, it really brought to light to me the importance of making sure the two aren't disconnected. The head and the heart are connected, that they are one and the same. So that's kind of where that came from. And a big jump I felt like I made in that development of understanding was this past semester, I took a class on Christology, which probably was my favorite so far. I'm only about a third of the way through because I've been doing one night class a semester, but it was such an eye-opener for me. The professor that I had was absolutely excellent. There were 3 people in my class, so there was a lot of time to just talk. Mm-hmm. And the way that he explained Christ to us, I took undergrad classes in Christology and all that stuff, but it was not the same. Something this time just sort of really just ignited my spirit, and it for the first time really just took what I was learning and changed my perspective on a lot of different things. Learning who the person of Christ and his actions in salvation history, and how that not just affects my future, in heaven someday maybe, but what it means for the here and now. And that was really it set my heart on fire, especially so this past semester is fairly recently, but it kind of put into perspective everything that I had been doing in the last 7 years, and it's really going to inform my future ministry, which I kind of just started. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
Christology, could you explain what the study of that is?
Yeah, it's literally the study of Christ.
Okay,
yeah,
that's what I thought, but
it's not always clear. So it's just the study of Christ, his actions, and then the way that my professor did it, he sort of started with the history of Christ and went into all these heresies, which was fun, and then how to understand the nature of Christ, and then the second half of the semester was what does that mean for me now? So it was really, really interesting to talk about that and to really use what I had just learned about the foundation of who Christ is and help that inform my perspective on life. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think having a balance of mind and heart is super important, because there's people on both sides.
Yeah.
Right.
It's I can only believe in God if I can prove it, and
yes.
if I can have all of this knowledge to then bring it back and explain it.
Yes.
And then there's people that are just totally just on the other deep end, where they're just all heart, just following all emotion. And then when they don't feel something, then that's where they kind of break and fall apart. Where if you have both, you kind of tie those all together.
Yeah,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's why I love St. Anselm, ironically. His definition of theology is faith seeking understanding. So it's sort of beginning with this belief, beginning with I am assured that Christ is, or that God is, and then with that belief in my heart, I go and to seek the understanding with my mind, and also having to kind of accept that we're not going to discover it all. The intellectual can only get you so far. The rest of it needs to be faith. So they both definitely, there is room for both. And obviously there, in the history of the church, some people who are way more intellectually gifted, like Aquinas and all, the patristics and the church fathers. And then there were, we've got the mystics and everyone who kind of brings it from the opposite. So that's why I love the whole, like, the body of Christ really ties it all together. Because, just studying from a master's, I definitely, these people are so much smarter than I am, but like just sort of gleaning what I can and then taking that and applying it to my spiritual life it's just such a wonderful, like a full, rich Catholic experience. So yeah, there's both sides, and we need both so desperately, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And the complementarity of the two, I think, are also tie into the complementarity of masculine and feminine energy and the different roles that they play within the church and within the household. So I think we could move into that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just something that I find super interesting is like, I mean, today, it's just kind of like either you're a girl boss or like you have toxic masculinity, all that stuff.
Right.
Like there's a good balance, like it's what's meant to be. So could you kind of explain what the church like teaches about like feminine spirituality?
Yeah, so I want to start by saying, like, I'm not a master in this at all. Like, I haven't read all the books, I don't know all the things, but just experiencing what I did. So, teaching in the Catholic school, I came in contact with a lot of girls. So I started in 2017. I've been teaching ever since. And I came in contact with a lot of girls who kind of just like didn't really know who they were and didn't know like what to do with their femininity in the church. And a lot of the times the church has, or not the church, I'm sorry. The world has the skewed idea of what the church teaches about femininity, that like the faith is men and the faith is priests, and then like the women are just secondary. And that's not true at all. That's not what the church teaches. That's not what the church, that's not the right experience of women in the church. And, the church is made up of broken people. So obviously some women are going to have experiences maybe of the negative, which it breaks my heart for, because when you experience what it should be, what it is, it's so beautiful. So within the church, men and women, male and female, are equal. Just because, there's not female priests. I know Pope Francis just said something about this. Doesn't necessarily mean that our role is lesser than. If you look at, the role of Mother Mary, she's, the queen of heaven and earth. We have such a special role as women in the church. But that doesn't necessarily always look like girl boss. It doesn't necessarily always look like getting married and having 12 children. Like, what femininity is you in the church as a woman. So, I know Pope Francis has really started to get into, bringing women into the decisions of the church. And John Paul II said that the feminine genius is needed wherever big decisions are being made. So we as females bring a different kind of knowledge and wisdom and understanding that males can't bring, and then males, same for us as well. So there's that there's that give and take, but women tend to be a little bit more nurturing. So we're thinking of like the nurturing aspect of all of the things that the church teaches, right? And coming from a long line of patristics and male thinking, it almost like the females like soften it a little bit and bring that beauty to it. We like to make things pretty, so like bringing the beauty into Catholicism as well, and not just appealing to the head, but also appealing to the heart. And so like there's that give and take. And so when I was at Illyria Catholic, which was the first school I taught at, I started their women's ministry, and it was really great to spend time with those girls, just to talk to them about, like, you don't have to be like this girl who like sits in dresses and like looks pretty to, be a woman in the church. I love that. I love getting dressed up. I love, wearing pretty things, but like that's not what you have to be in order to be a woman in the church. Like you can like going hiking and like spending time outside. You can like one of my household sisters in college, I went to Franciscan University. She loved longboarding, like skateboarding, like on like those Franciscan hills. Like she just did it all the time, and she was one of the most beautiful women I knew, one of the most authentic women I knew. So I think the key to feminine spirituality as well as masculine is just authenticity, being who I am, being who God called me to be. And that takes a lot of courage, especially in today's culture, to be who God calls me to be, regardless of what society is telling me I have to be. You know, like I have to, almost like they're calling me, like society's calling me to fit a mold, when society also tells you don't have to fit a mold. It's like a weird inverted like distortion of what the truth is. So if you look at all of the saints, even just women saints, but saints in general, they're so different, and they have such different ideas in spirituality, and that's so important. So the diversity of the saints, I think, can speak a lot to our feminine spirituality, is that like I don't have to just go be a nun. I don't have to necessarily be a way-for mother. I can serve the Lord and serve the church in so many different ways as female, as long as I'm doing what he calls me to do. And that is, I think, sometimes the key piece that we can be a little bit scared of is, what does God want me to do? So like that discernment can be a little bit terrifying.
Yeah, especially because you taught in high schools,
Yes.
like especially at that age,
Yeah.
where everybody's just lost in general.
Yeah.
Could you kind of tell some stories about like the ministry and like how it impacted some of the girls that you ministered to?
We've got something special for all our Catholic organizations. Now, before you skip past this part, it's not an ad. It's more like an incredible opportunity to take your digital presence to the next level. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. Something only for our podcast listeners. We, DM Productions, have a 2-day Catholic social media makeover course. It's an online course specifically made for Catholic organizations. It will take your social media to the next level. And we make it easier than ever with our step-by-step video walkthroughs, cheat sheets, customizable templates, and more. Catholic organizations, let's start creating the quality and results that secular businesses have, but with the depth and beauty of Catholicism. Oh, and did I mention the price? $700. But remember I said I was going to let you in on a little secret? Use code DMPodcast to get it completely free. No credit card required. Just pop that code in and you're all set. Head over to www.dm.productions/social media makeover or click the link in the description. Now back to the show.
So I started the ministry actually the second year I was there in 2018, and I did it all the way until I left Elyria Catholic, not this past year, but the year before. And it started out small. So I started out with a core team of girls, and we mostly just were, the big ministry was just being female together, and learning about what the church teaches. And one of my favorite things about teaching inside and outside of the classroom is just answering questions. Again, I'm not saying I know everything. I'm not saying I'm the master of knowledge, but I love being able to like take maybe misunderstandings and be like, okay, well, I thought the church said this about femininity, and like just like being like, no, actually this is how it is, and it's beautiful, and like showing the girls how beautiful it was. But the thing about the ministry that I did was it was very unextraordinary. I want to say it was a lot of just the smaller moments with girls. We did a retreat. We would do little events after school, and just the simple encounters that I would have with them, just, you know, asking questions, telling stories, or even on our Kairos retreat, when I did Kairos, there were times when I would get to talk with some of my girls who were in women's ministry, and you know, they just had, it was just the simple, quiet moments, the simple questions, and teaching them, you know, just about who they are and who they don't have to feel like they need to be according to society. And some of my favorite moments were when we would, you know, have these events or meetings, and the girls would like forget to check their phones. It sounds like really stupid and insignificant, but it's like we would like finish the meeting or finish whatever we were doing, and like they would be like, oh, I haven't looked at my phone the whole time. And I was like, yes. Like, because they're so connected and they're so worried about what everyone else is thinking about them, or like, you know, on social media, or like, oh, I have to upload a picture to Snapchat or Instagram. And it's like those moments when they got to just talk to each other and like be the face to face, I think were the ones that we got to grow as women the most. So those are my favorite moments. And then, you know, giving them that retreat experience. Some of the best times we had were at our women's retreat. That was usually around Christmas time. And again, they were not on their phones. They were so happy, and they were so beautiful when they were so happy. You know, like that's, they're beautiful whether they're happy or not. But like, it was just, they exuded such joy at those retreats, and being together as girls. And I think that's really important, is that like we create those spaces just for the girls to be together. Again, not saying anything bad about toxic masculinity or anything, but there's just such a freedom when we have the girls together to be able to explore and to talk freely about the struggles that we have as women in the church, and then the victories that we have as well. So just, you know, the ways that we like are able to break through. And then it's a different spirituality. The way that we experience the love of the Father and experience the love of Christ is just different from the way that guys do. And that's okay. That's completely fine. So that's like the big thrust of the ministry, was just like having the girls discover like who they are and how to be loved by the Father in a way that might be a little bit different than the guys. Of course, we have the common worship. We've got Mass. We've got, you know, Liturgy of the Hours, and we've got when we're all together, and that's beautiful, and I love it. But there was something just great about giving the girls a chance to sort of like breathe and not have to be on, you know, like performing for the guys, because all teenage girls do that, whether we want to, you know, admit it or not. And so they were able to just sort of like relax and explore, like, how does God love me, and how can I receive that love? And what can I do with that? How can I receive it and like let it multiply and then give it back? So when we do go to school and there's boys around, how do I love them in a healthy way? How do I love myself in a healthy way? And how do I take that identity as beloved daughter of God or beloved bride of Christ and let that affect the way that I interact with my brothers and sisters in Christ? So those were really special moments that I have, and just, you know, being able to sit with the girls as they're realizing this. You know, there was a part where I would have them come into the church, and they got to have like face-to-face Eucharist time, and it would just be like them and the Eucharist and them and the monstrance in the church, and just so many experiences of girls just being like, I've never really felt like I was seen like that until that moment. And it was, you know, mind-blowing and really humbling to hear them say that. So it was, yeah, those were like really beautiful experiences. And then just, you know, teaching them how to pray. I had one girl come to me one year, and this is not a statement on Catholic schools, but just in general, she's like, I've been in Catholic schools for 11 years and I don't know how to pray. And I was like, oh boy, like, let's fix that. So getting to, again, coming back to sort of like that head and heart, getting to teach them how to pray, and like teach them that, like, okay, it's not just what we learn in theology class, it's, you know, here as well. So, you know, that really kind of started off my desire to, you know, get the kids in front of the Eucharist as much as I possibly could. I would take them to the chapel. Our school had a chapel, praise God, every Friday. And, you know, the kids would start to hunger for that. And be like, hey, we need to go to the chapel. Or like, if we didn't have school on a Friday, they would come back on Monday and be like, we missed chapel time last week, and we have 2 this week. It was like really amazing to me that they were asking for it. Because at first, at the beginning of the year, they're like, oh, I just have to sit and pray. But there's so much noise going on around them that they just needed that quiet space. So eventually, you know, doing that with the girls as well, just getting them into that quiet space where they got to experience who they are as daughters of Christ. Was a big part of it. So
yeah, what were some of the like misconceptions and common questions that you got from the girls where you're like, yeah, that's not true, this is actually what the church teaches?
Oh, there were lots of them. You know, the first one being like, what the heck is the deal with no woman priests? And so having that discussion is always really, really like nuanced, and it's hard to, especially when you've got like a group of girls like gathered around you, like, what are you gonna say? So that was a big one. Like the church hates women because we can't be priests, but it's like, no, actually, like we have very, very different roles to play within the life of the church. So just because we're not ordained doesn't mean that we are not, you know, valued in the life of the church. That was a big one. And then just misunderstandings about, you know, female sexuality was a big one. Just about like how, you know, what modesty is, and, you know, the church hates, you know, sex, and like the church hates my body because I can't show it off. And it's like, no, actually, like that, the church loves your body, you know, Christ loves your body, and that's exactly why modesty is important. So that was always a really a really difficult conversation because they're coming from, especially in TikTok, where there was like this whole TikTok movement about purity culture and how it's bad. And I don't know if that's still a thing, but they were all coming like, yeah, everyone on TikTok is saying now like that, you know, purity culture is bad and that it like victimized them. And I was like, well, while it's true that there are really unhealthy ways to look at what purity is and modesty is, very much, like the heart of it and what it really teaches is beautiful. And so like getting them to understand, like, you know, like your body is very good, and that's why, you know, like we veil the sacred, and, you know, you don't just put it out there for everyone to see, because it is sacred. It is a good thing, and it's meant for something specific, and it's going to be really beautiful when you see it in that context. So kind of, you know, like that was a big one, like modesty, sexuality, and then learning how to function within like the complementarity of men and women. So when I started the women's ministry, again, it wasn't something that I was just like, we need it because guys are bad. You know, I was just like, this is something that was put on my heart, and that I think could be really beautiful because I have these beautiful girls in front of me and I want to help them know Jesus in a very special way. So that's why I felt like I was called to start that. And then so the boys were like, we need a men's ministry. And I was like, okay, you do that. I'm not a man. I'm just find a male teacher to do that with you. And so they did. And then all of a sudden it kind of was like the girls were like, we need to be better than the men's ministry. And I'm like, no, this is not why we're doing this, you know? So like kind of getting that understanding of like, we're not trying to beat anyone. We're just trying to make ourselves better. So that was always kind of like a misconception that like they have to be pitted against each other. Whereas, you know, femininity is just, it's beauty, and then bringing that beauty to others, not being like, we don't have to put men down to make sure that females are respected. We just have to make sure that both are respecting the other, and that's really hard to do. But we start in little ways, and then just I was so humbled to watch how my girls would take that. I call them my girls. The girls would take that and, you know, go into the world and continue to learn and continue to grow. And I look at some of them, I'm still in touch with a couple of them, just the ways that they are still living for Christ and setting the world on fire, and they're like holier than I am now, you know, like they're just like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful to see them take the seed that was planted and then just, you know, bloom with it, has been the most wonderful thing. And I think is one of the most beautiful examples of what femininity is. It's what we do. It's we receive and then we multiply. So that, you know, them receiving what they learned in all humility from me through Christ. It wasn't me, it was Christ. And then taking that and setting the world on fire and teaching other people about it has been one of the biggest joys of being a teacher. And I hope to continue that into my ministry now. So yeah, there
was like 3 points that you brought up there.
Okay.
So like the girls like not being able to be ordained, and then sexuality and modesty, and then I don't know how we would categorize like the third one, like pitting girls against guys, I guess. So I kind of want to answer those questions. So like, why can't girls be ordained?
So the biggest reason is that we follow the model of Christ, and Christ chose a special group of people to surround him, and those are the people that he sort of sent forward with priesthood, and we know those as the 12 disciples or 12 apostles. And so we're following that example that these men are going to stand in persona Christi. They're going to be in the person of Christ within the sacraments. So Christ, though he is God, he came in the form of man. And so when men stand in the place of Christ, you know, they are standing in the person of Christ, who was a man. And there's also this idea of fatherhood as well. So they're representing Christ and God in general to the community, and Jesus told us to call God Father, and that's why we call our priests Father, because they're standing sort of in the person of Christ. So that fatherhood and that that leadership and guidance that priests exemplify for us, not saying again that women can't lead, but men serve and they lead and they protect in a very specific way in the person of Christ, like Christ did. And so that is a very short way of saying, you know, like Christ chose his 12 apostles. He was a man, he chose men, and the men are called to kind of like serve, to protect, and to defend, and to be fathers for the rest of church. So when they do, when the sacraments are dispensed through them, they are doing it through the person of Christ, who gathers in. So Christ as Father, Christ as man, Christ as person, through the men that are ordained priests.
And I also think that applies to like marriage and family too. Like,
of course, yeah.
You know, being a husband and a wife, or like a wife and a husband, but like your role, like you're a leader, you're a protector, and like it's so nice that I don't have to do that because I'm not good at it. And like so that applies to marriage and family as well.
Yes,
and
for sure.
I don't know how to like explain that anymore, but it's just everything that applies to what you just said also applies to that as well. Like it just makes sense and it doesn't contradict each other.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that answered it really well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like it definitely does. And that the marriage is, or sorry, the family is called to, you know, mirror kind of like the church and how, you know, Christ loves the church. And, you know, Christ loved the church. How did Christ love the church? Well, he laid his life down for her. So I'm not married, but, you know, seeing good, holy marriages around me, understanding that, you know, both men and women will lay down their lives for each other, but especially the men sometimes have to lay down, really dealing with us as women, have to lay down their life for us, and in a very beautiful way serve in that way. So not saying like leadership doesn't necessarily, I know everyone like pulls out that verse, it's like women be submissive, and like that's, submission isn't, you know, lay down and take it, but it's like, okay, I submit to be under the mission of, to follow the mission of the husband, to be partners as well as a helper, just like God created Adam and Eve as the helper, as a partner to Adam. So as he leads and protects and guides, she also takes and multiplies and nurtures as well. So there is that give and take. So it's not just being submissive, but also look at the second part of that verse. What does it mean to lay down your life for your bride? Well, Christ laid down his life for his bride, and that meant dying. So while not necessarily always physically dying for the bride, sometimes just dying to self, putting myself on hold for the needs of, you know, my spouse. So in the terms of priesthood, putting to love as the church, as Christ loved, putting their needs on hold. And if you look at good holy priests, they do that all the time, putting their needs on hold, dying to themselves, getting up at 4 a.m. to do an anointing, you know, and doing stuff like that for his bride, the church. So there's a real beauty in the mirroring of marriage and priesthood, and, you know, the masculinity and femininity of that.
I'm really glad you brought up the verse, because that's like a hot take. Like submissive verse. Yeah. Everybody just has an opinion about that.
Yeah. Right.
But yeah, I think you covered that really, really well.
Thank you.
So I guess the next part is sexuality and modesty. So those are kind of two different things. So whichever one you want to cover first.
So yeah, sexuality is a huge thing. We could spend hours talking about that right now in the context of our culture. But modesty, especially, is something that people have a lot of, females specifically have a lot of problems with. And I used to as well. And I always kind of felt like, you know, like, if the body's so good, why am I covering it up? You know, like, why are people telling me like that I can't, you know, show off? And it's really like, if we look at stuff like the Eucharist, and the Eucharist when we aren't receiving it at Mass, is kept in a tabernacle. It's kept in a sacred box, because when something is sacred, we veil that to keep it from, you know, abuses and, you know, other things going on. So it's not necessarily a fear of exposure, but modesty is understanding that my body is meant for a specific purpose, and not exposing it when it doesn't need to be exposed, and understanding that there is a sacredness to it, and we're veiling it because it's sacred. So there's a lot of different ways you could take that. But it's not just because, you know, everyone, you know, like thinks that like the sex is dirty or the body is dirty or something, but it's because it's beautiful. It's because it's good that we do veil it, so that, not necessarily, I know a lot of the times modesty can be like, well, we don't want to tempt our brothers in Christ. And it's like, it's not even about the temptation, but it's that, you know, our bodies, whether we understand it or not, or whether we like it or not, the world is a fallen place. And we veil that to keep that sacredness, so that it doesn't just become, you know, another thing to see. And that's, I think, what the big problem with porn is right now. Just to kind of throw that into the mix, is that like, it's just like yep, that's just another thing that you see, and that's another thing that people do, and there's loss of a sense of what is sacred there because it's just out there. So when we veil that, we're kind of telling the world that like there is something that's sacred about me, and not just anyone gets to see it. It's meant for a specific person, or if I'm a religious sister, or if I'm single, it's maybe not for a specific person, but I want to keep that intact until we make it to heaven, where everything will be perfected, our desires will be perfected, and we won't have that need to hide anymore. So the modesty now, I think, protects the beauty of what is. And there are ways too to like dress pretty and like dress nicely and still be modest, like, and that's, I think, something that I really tried to bring home. That's the prettiest,
like, to be dressing modestly. I mean, like, there's actually, I don't know if it's called a movement or whatever, but it's kind of a trend now to be more modest. Like Sophia Richie is a big like the it girl, I guess. And she's very modest and very classy, and everybody wants to be her. Right. And that is such a good role model for like, in comparison to all of the like Instagram like models, whatever. Right. And so it is kind of swinging that way, which is really, really nice to see, because even not from like a Catholic standpoint, just modesty in general is really important. Yeah. And it is beautiful. Yeah. I guess another thing is you keep talking about veiling, and I recently started like wearing a veil to church, and I think a lot more young people I see veiling as well. So I guess I'm not really good at explaining why I veil. It is because the tabernacle is veiled, like everything that's holy in the church is veiled, and so like you want to show that as well. But I don't know if you have a better way of explaining that.
Well, I personally don't. I think it's beautiful. Those of you who do, I think that's wonderful. But I think the big part of that is also like the sacramentality of the body itself, sacramentality of the world around us. So a sacrament is a visible sign of what is invisible. So that's why we have, the sacraments it's not just a piece of bread. It is the Eucharist. It's not just the priest saying, I forgive you. You are forgiven. It's not just pouring water. It is new life. So the sacraments are that concrete way that we see what's invisible. So veiling, just like a religious sister, is sort of, it's that outward sign of, putting a veil or almost like not concealing in a bad way, but just like concealing the sacred, and saying to like the world around you, not to say I'm better than you, but to say, look, this is sacred. I am sacred. The Eucharist is sacred. So that sacredness is that outward sign. So it's almost like a reminder to us of, while there's the spirituality, there is also the physical as well, which is really important. So, and that can kind of go along with modesty as well, right? The sacramentality of the body. The body is just as much the person as the soul is. A person is where their body is, so like the body is the person as much as the soul is the person. A human person is body and soul. So the veil is a way to sort of, I don't want to say symbolize, but to communicate to the world around you, like there is sacredness here in me and my body. Not to cover up something, not to hide something because, I think it's bad, but to veil it because I want to honor it in a really special way. And that's why religious sisters do what they do. That's why there is the habit, because it is a reminder to the world around us. There's something greater, like I am a bride of Christ. So I'm denying a good now, marriage, a family, so that I can witness to the good that's coming. So it's not denying marriage, family, sex because it's bad, but denying it now because there's something good coming. So we need the both. We need the male and the female. We need the marriage and religious. And we need that veil to remind us of, the spiritual as well. So it's not just the spiritual, it is physical and spiritual as well. Kind of got off on a tangent there, but
yeah, I agree. I mean, like, also Mary, like it to be more like Mary. I never really had a good relationship, or not necessarily a good relationship, just no relationship with Mary. And it's kind of been revealed to me over the past like couple of months that like, even though I haven't been like asking her to pray for me or like just watch over and protect us. Like she's always been there, like in crazy ways, like actually. Like when I was younger, I worked at the Servants of Mary Center for Peace, the largest statue of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the world.
Right.
And like I just worked there. I was there all the time, hours and hours and hours a day, every day for years. And I just like, oh, you know, it's just normal to have like be on these holy grounds and like just be a servant. And then we were just at the the Christ the Bridegroom Monastery. And the grounds there are called Our Lady of Mariapo, which is like another thing that I was going to as a kid, like all the time. Yeah. And there's been like little things that have been planted that like, wow, like she's been there the whole time and like really watching over us. So that's another thing, to be like more like Mary, who is the perfect woman. To like just look up to her and be more like her as well. Yeah,
she came into my life in crazy ways in college. She's the woman. She is the best woman. She's I was at Franciscan, and I joined a household because we have households at Franciscan, and the one that I joined is called Cari Domini, which means beloved of the master. And it was, in a very real sense, like the women in my household, we were there to help each other, like experience the world as true women and really take Mary as our model. And it was like the first time that I started really, because like I prayed the rosary with my family when I was younger, and I was like, right, whatever, you know, Mary's there, she's holy, whatever. But like, when, you know, like when I went to college and I had these women around me, my age, fun, happy women, really taking seriously having Mary as our model was like radically new for me. And I had girls around me calling her mom, just referring to her as mom. And it like really like brought her down to like this level of like, I can have a relationship with Mary. Yeah. And it's not worshiping her, you know, like I can pray and ask her to pray for me and to love me and to, you know, like wrap me up in her arms like a mother would, and to live like her. And I, all the time when I was younger, I just kind of you have this image of Mary just like standing there nicely, you know, in that little prayer pose. And it's like, great, you know, like I don't know if I want to be like that because that sounds boring, but like Mary was really like, she had to be strong, you know, like you looked at the situation she was in, and while she did consent to being the mother of God, that was her her fiat, like she was in a really difficult situation and she had to be strong. She really had to trust in the Lord. But also, you know, like I believe that having the Lord as your strength also brings joy. So like she wasn't just this like sad little lady who, you know, had to bear the Son of God and suffer all the time. She was a sorrowful mother, but also I'm sure there was so many joys in her life as well, you know, being the mother of Christ and having that experience, and then just being a woman, being feminine and you know, making a home for Jesus and Joseph, and bringing joy to their lives as well. Yeah. So modeling Mary, not only within that modesty, but also just in her joy and her strength as well. There's nothing to sneeze at there. It's pretty great. It's a pretty great way to live, if you ask me.
Yeah. The last point was like pitting like girls against guys, which I feel like you explained really, really well. But I don't know if you wanted to like explain a little bit more about like, yeah, it's not a competition. Like,
yeah. Well, I think so. Like, I think feminism started out in a really great way where we wanted equality because society wasn't treating women correctly. But I think it swung way in the opposite direction, where all of a sudden now, in order to have respect, I need to put a man down and I need to say that he's less than, or I need to say that he's like dumb or something. And it's like toxic femininity. Like it's swung such the other way in that, like, we're kind of telling men now as a collective society, like, we don't want you to rise up and be men. We just want to be, you know, like women. And like, again, women are great. I think we're awesome. I think we're strong. I think women are wonderful, but also like we need to recognize that like both of us have roles, and it's okay to let men be men. It's okay to let a guy hold a door for you because he's trying to be a gentleman. It's not saying that you're weak or that you can't. It's that like, okay, he's trying to serve you and, you know, and be nice to you. And while yes, there is a lot of pain out there between the two sexes. I think that if we as women kind of start gently calling men forward, we can, there can be that like beautiful balance in society. And I see it kind of coming in a lot of different families I know, in a lot of, Catholic circles, just like there's not this competition here. We are partners. We're here to work together. We're here to get each other to heaven. And that doesn't mean I have to get there first. It doesn't mean that I'm, better than you. But it's just, I think this illness as a society we have right now where it's just in order to be equal, I have to be better. And that happens in a lot of different ways instead beyond just masculine and feminine. But to recognize that, that men have their role, men have their place, and we have our role and we have our place. And just because we have these places, they don't need to be the same place. They also don't need to discount the other, but we can exist together. But it has a lot to do with, respect for myself, respect for the other, and not being greedy with, where I want to be in life, if that makes sense. Not having to put others away or others down in order for me to achieve my greatest abilities. We are who we're called to be, and that doesn't mean that I'm called to be necessarily better than you. It doesn't mean I'm called to be, whether that's male or female, but I am who I'm called to be, and there's room for us both. There's space for us both to be who we're called to be. As best as we can.
Yeah.
So.
I would say like I'd never put men down, but
right.
When I was in high school, I was very much so like, I am going to be the rich aunt that like doesn't have kids, and like I'm just going to climb the corporate ladder, and like, that's the life I want to live.
Right. Yeah.
And so I like worked really, really hard in school. Like there's nothing to be ashamed of there at all. Like, I mean, I'm a blonde, but like I got straight A's, so like cool. But anyways, I got like this internship, like it was really, really big. And so I was like, wow, like my dreams are coming true.
Right.
And like I was, doing all this stuff, like it, just right out of high school. And then very soon afterwards, it's like, yeah, this is not fulfilling. Like a couple years into that internship, that turned into a job, which I'm very grateful for. It was just like, yeah, I don't want to like spend like, I don't know, all the years of my life like in an office,
right,
doing like all the stuff that doesn't fulfill me. And like I can't imagine myself like staying here until I retire. Like I want a family, like I want a relationship. And then like I met Dom and we started dating, and it's like, wow, this is what I want. Like I can see myself having a family with you, and like I want to stay home like with kids and like make bread and do all this stuff. And like it's just so nice that I didn't have to be like this independent girl boss, whatever. Like I can step back and like let him lead, and it works out so beautifully that like I can be so feminine and it's not like a weakness.
Right.
And you can be so masculine and it's not overbearing.
Right.
It's just beautiful. And I'm like, I'm so blessed and happy that like I was able to come to that realization relatively early on. Yeah. But like I've been there, done that. Like it wasn't it. Yeah. And I think a lot of girls are also coming to this realization too, like on TikTok. They're like, I'm working 40 hours a week and like I just can't do it, because like women like aren't necessarily built for that. Yeah. Like men are more so meant to do that. Like women are meant to do other things. Yeah. And so like, oh yeah, I would rather stay home and do all of this stuff. Like that's more the leaning. It's more so leaning that way now, which is like, oh, everything's just going into place. Right. So yeah.
And it's the cool thing is that as women we can do something that men can. We can like have kids. Like that's super cool. It's like a superpower, honestly. Like I can't even like imagine how great that is, because I haven't had to do it yet. But it just there is a freedom in realizing that like I don't have to like have it all myself. Like I don't have to have it all together. And like there is, it might be for a different woman to be called in a different way. Maybe not all of us are called to marriage, but, you know, called to maybe be single in church and serve the church in a way that is single, and, you know, have a job. But I think it's important for us to understand too that, like, and I think this happens in secular society as well as Catholicism is like, your job, no matter what it is, even if you are called to be single, is not going to fulfill you. We need community. We're made for community. Yes. We're made for others. Yeah. So, you know, finding not just a job that you like, which is great, and whatever, you know, like, you have to provide for yourself, but also like to have meaningful relationships outside of that as well.
Yeah, it's not the end all be all.
Right.
Like, this is gonna fulfill me. Like, money is like, I'll be happy once I have money. Right. And, like, all this stuff. Like, that's just a lie you're telling yourself.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, it so is. And it, you know, money is it's good to have because you have to survive, but also really empty. So whether that is having good, you know, strong female friendships outside of work, or having a relationship and having a family, it's like really important to realize that, like, the job isn't everything. And like, yeah, you can, you know, want that for yourself, whatever, but like, as long as we realize that, like, we're not meant to like have these things in isolation and by ourselves. And then also, you know, like, any of that without Christ is going to be meaningless as well. So, you know, like, I can make all the money in the world, but, you know, I can't take it with me, you know, like, at the end of time or after I die. It's like that's all just going to go away. So while, yes, I can, you know, make the money, like, what am I doing with my money? And like, am I using it just to be greedy, or am I using it to help other people? Am I, you know, donating some of it? So it's all like in proper perspective and all in, you know, proper balance, which I learned from a really close friend lately, or in the last couple of years, that like, balance is really what we're shooting for. So it kind of goes in every direction: balance between male and female, balance between head and heart. It's that, you know, that's where virtue is. Virtue is not in either extreme. Virtue is in balance. So to have that, which is really hard to do. And we're not perfect because, you know, we're human, but having that balance between the two and realizing that there are goods all around us, but like, choosing what the highest good is for myself and what's going to make me the holiest, whether that's marriage and a family, whether that's a single life, working in ministry, or, you know, working a job, or whether that's religious life. There's always that balance. Yeah.
And your sister is a nun, isn't she?
Yes.
And so, like, how, like, can you explain, like, how that's a completely different life than marriage?
Oh yeah,
it's beautiful. And so I guess a lot of people would think, like, oh no, I'm not called to that. Like, they just completely dismiss that, especially girls, young girls, and thinking like, oh, I'm just gonna be like single and alone and miserable and like it's super bored for the rest of my life. And I know that's not true. So could you kind of explain how, like, your sister, from your perspective, like, what her life is like?
Yeah. So my sister is a Franciscan TOR. So that's Third Order Regular. There's like a bunch of different Franciscans. They're all over the place. But she is 9 years older than I am. We have a sister in between us. And when I was a junior in high school is when she decided to enter religious life. So she went on a couple of visits to different orders, and found one ultimately that was where her heart found rest, basically, is the best way that I can describe it. And so ever since then, she entered that specific order. She's been there since, 2011, which has been quite a long time. And at first I had a really hard time with it, because I was, closer to her. She had moved back home with us after she went to college, and my other sister was gone. So I was like really like clinging to her as my older sister. And, it was hard at first. It definitely was. And it definitely has its hard moments, because I miss her and I can't see her every day. But she does have time where she can come home during the year. We have times when we can go visit her, and that's going to be different from order to order. So like there's the Dominicans, the Franciscans, the Byzantines are a little bit different. So like there's different orders, and what each order is, like how they do like their time with family and time with community is going to look a little bit different. But she is able to come home for 2 weeks every year. And she usually does that during the summertime. And so we get to spend lots of time with her, which is great. And then we can go down and visit her. We have like family days, so we can go visit her. And we see her sometimes during Thanksgiving. They, invite the families down for a big Thanksgiving meal, which is it's so much fun. And the food is delicious. And like we get to spend time with her, which is really great. So which is actually what we did this past Thanksgiving. So yeah, it is sometimes really hard to not just like be able to pick up my phone and text my sister and be like, hey, this funny thing happened today. So sometimes, because she does have access to email because of what she does within the community, so sometimes I'll email her and like a text message and be like, this funny thing happened, and it's like all typed in the subject line, and she's just like, wow. But she's so I do see her, you know, like a couple times a year. And like I said, it was really difficult at first. The first time I really like felt super blessed by it though, was when my grandmother passed away in, oh gosh, I can't remember now, 2013. Yeah, it was my first. I was a freshman in college, and she went into the hospital on December 1st and passed away on Christmas. So it was a long month of, you know, spending time in the hospital. She had gone in for a procedure and like just kind of never recovered. And we spent most of our Christmas time, you know, like that Advent time preparing for Christmas in the hospital, kind of just like waiting for her to, you know, let go. And it was really, really hard Christmas for us. But I remember being at the funeral, and my sister came up and she brought a couple other sisters with her. They usually travel in small groups, and just feeling like extra blessed that like my, you know, like my sister has kind of found her family in a sense. Like she's not just by herself, she's with this wonderful group of women, and that group of women, there were like 50 in the order at the time, like are all praying for us in a really intentional, special way. And they got to be at the funeral, they got to be you know, like with us, and they walked with us so beautifully during that time. So yeah, it was kind of hard to let her go, and it is hard sometimes, but it's beautiful to have, you know, that part of you know, spirituality. And she's just she's so happy, you know, like I see her and, you know, with her sisters, and when she comes home, and to see that her heart is at peace and that she's found, you know, like real beauty. And then like when we got to see her final vows, like my dad got to walk her down the aisle, well, both my parents did, so like she was going there to lay her life down in, you know, in union with Christ. It's basically like a wedding day. So that was an absolutely joyful day. And to see her with such joy among those women has just been such a great blessing. And then, you know, like she and those sisters pray for us so beautifully. And that's such a comfort to me. So yeah, it's really great. It's hard sometimes, but it is such a blessing to me to be able to witness that. And then like to have a really healthy perspective of what women's religious life is. Their order specifically is like contemplative active. So they'll spend a lot of time during the day praying, but also they have different ministries. They are on college campuses at Franciscan in Florida. And then they also reach out to the poor in Steubenville, because it's kind of a depressed area. And they'll just, you know, they do such beautiful ministry there with the homeless. And they're just, every time I see them, they're always smiling. They're always happy. They're always laughing. So that just brings such, you know, joy to my heart to see that. And to know that Anna's doing something that she loves. Well, Sister Anna Rose is her name, but still call her Anna. So, yeah.
That is so beautiful.
Yeah. So it's a really different perspective. And then I mentioned my other sister she's married with 4 kids. So I was
you have
like,
the whole spectrum.
I know. I always like to joke, like we've got all 3 like vocations in here right now. So, because I don't know what the Lord has in store for my life yet. So we've got just, you know, like different ways, and, you know, it's such a testament to the way that we were raised by my parents, such great ways that they really tried to integrate the faith into us. And I wouldn't be where I am today without the faith that they instilled in me. So, yeah.
And how can you see like your sister that's a nun compared to your sister that has a bunch of kids and is married? Like, how is that different? Like, what do you see in her?
Well, the thing that I see all the time is that they're both different kinds of hard. Every vocation that you have is going to be a challenge in a way, because like you're helping your spouse or your community grow in holiness. Like that's what your job is when you enter into that. So I see them both expressing femininity in very different ways. You know, my sister being so loving with her children, and, you know, giving up so much for them, and just to make them happy. And she's such a great mom. She does such a good job with them. And the way that she and her husband are such a team. And I see that every day, how they work together so well, and how he loves her and, you know, leads and protects the family. But also, you know, the way that she is her funny, quirky self, you know, within that as well, and how they are, how they work together and, you know, love their kids and bring them up. And yes, you know, he is like the head of the household, but she is very much, you know, his partner. And the way that that they work together, I see is so beautiful. And it's not without its challenges. Every marriage, even the holiest marriages, are going to have challenges. And then, I see my other sister, giving up, not that she was like forced into this like nungeon and like has to do all this stuff for the rest. That's what I like to call it.
I've never heard that before.
You come up with really funny nun puns when you have a nun who's a sister, or both a sister. I call her my sister, but she wasn't like forced into this in any way. She very much, is at peace there. So, but she did, like you give up, and you don't, she says this all the time and I love it. You don't go up to a woman on her wedding day and you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like now you're stuck with this dude for the rest of your life. Like that must suck. Like this is like the happiest day of your life, and you're like marrying the person that you love. And so you're not like, oh, that sucks. Like you're happy for them because they found goodness. So it's the same thing with religious sisters. I didn't go up to her on her final vows and be like, oh, that sucks for you, you're stuck this way. But like no, it's beautiful. So that's something that she's chosen over something else. Like you choose your husband over other guys, and she chooses this life over marriage and a family to witness to the greater things that are coming. She's married to Christ. She's giving her life to the church in a really beautiful way, and in a way that my other sister can't. And then my other sister having marriage and a family, bringing up, literally raising the church, like raising kids, is doing things that my other sister can't. So I like kind of seeing both of them, how Anna can minister to all different kinds of people, how Mel ministers through her children. And it's just a really beautiful way that I've seen femininity in many different ways in my life. And, neither of them were like girl boss sisters. Neither of them were like super like, oh, like feminine dresses all the time. Like they're their own brand of femininity, and I love that about both of them. They're they're so unique and so different. They're living out holiness in the best way that they can, the way that Christ has called them to. So it's been fun to watch for sure. And then I'm the aunt that just comes in and gives them all the sugar and then pieces out. So that's what I do right now, but I don't know what the Lord has in store for me yet. It's different every day. And I like to, when I was teaching, I called the kids that I taught my kids, and, now entering into this new ministry and campus ministry at St. Anselm, the kids that I'm going to serve through youth group are going to be my kids as well. So that's the way that right now I'm expressing my femininity through what Christ has called me to. And maybe someday I'll be married. Maybe someday I'll be a sister. I don't know yet. I'm still discerning that. Or maybe I'll stay single and minister to the church in this specific way.
And all of those are beautiful,
right?
By the way, like none is lesser than the other. Exactly.
Each one has their place, and we need them desperately. We need all of them. So yeah, I like being part of this little trio right now. It's fun.
Did you want to talk about anything?
No, I think that was great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
A huge spectrum of a bunch of different things, but they all tied together. So I thought it was really, really good. Where can people find more about you, find more about your ministry?
So right now, like I said, I'm brand new at my post at St. Anselm, but I'm going to be working as a campus minister. So I'm going to be doing youth group stuff for junior high and high school students, male and female. So any, the St. Anselm, I believe it's STANSELM.org. So that's our parish website. I'll be, doing ministry there the best I can. And yeah, that's, I guess, where you can find me. I'll just be doing my thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you both so much.